we had a hard time keeping janitors in the art department. That's probably the toughest janitorial position on the campus, because what is trash and what's treasure? It takes a special eye to know that. And so we tended to run through janitors pretty fast around there. And one day I got a call from the director of maintenance, and he said he had somebody that he thought was going to be a good janitor for us, and he'd like to bring him by. And so Dave Stewart came. That's the first time I'd ever laid eyes on him. He didn't look very different back then from the way he looks now. He had on the same pair of overalls, I think. And he had a little pad in his pocket, and he was walking around taking notes about, you know, how we wanted to dispose of special things like solvents, and how to clean up, and what's done in this room, what's done in that room. For some reason, I was the guy that got to show him around. And that was all I knew about him, was that he was a new janitor. But you know, there was just that little something different about him right from the beginning. I could tell I liked him a lot, and that he had a great sense of humor, and he was obviously real smart. And so we started working together, and he was very good at the job. He was really good at it. He became real popular with the students right away, which is a good sign. And so anyway, I just thought we had our janitor situation all squared away. He didn't say anything about being interested in art, and I'm not really sure he was all that interested in art in those first days. But the thing where he first started showing up on the art scope was, we have an annual student art show, and any student at the college is eligible to submit work to it. You don't even have to be an art student. You just send your work in, and it's a juried show. We always have somebody from outside the college judge the show. And so all the work was gathered, the show was judged. My students and I were in charge of the art gallery, so we set the show up. We did it on a weekend. And we got finished late on a Sunday night. All the lights were adjusted, and you know, the labels were up, and we closed the door and left for the night. I came back on Monday morning and opened the door, and there was something there that I hadn't put there. And it had appeared between 10 o'clock at night on Sunday and 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, and it was properly lit, and it was on a pedestal in the best spot in the gallery, right in the center of the front room. And it had a label on it that gave a title for the artwork, but the artist was anonymous. But it had a page torn from a collection of Emily Dickinson's poetry. And I can roughly quote what the poem said. It said, "A little madness is appropriate in the spring, even in the court of the king." And that was taped to the front of the pedestal. And the title for the artwork was, "You Are 1-2 Trashmaster Bomber." And this is what was sitting on the pedestal, and there's the insignia of the Air Force that it came from. And I had no idea who had done it. But one of the things that I noticed after I looked at it kind of carefully was that it was made out of my stuff. I recognized certain things that were on my desk. And, you know, and so I had a couple of suspects for who would do this. I had one student who actually had a key to the art gallery because he was my assistant. And he had kind of a funky sense of humor, you know, a little bit edgy. He was the kind of guy who wouldn't have minded stealing things off my desk and turning it into an artwork and poking me in the ribs with it. But he came in after a little while, and you know, I could tell right away he was not the guy who did it. But he and I speculated for a while, and we could not figure out who had gotten into the gallery and placed this artwork in there. But after a while, we kind of both agreed this is the best thing in the show. It should have won the first prize in the show. And so after a little while, Dave was making his rounds with a trash can or something, smoking his pipe, and came walking by, and we were standing there beginning to kind of laugh at this thing, you know, and I don't know whether I was kind of mad or kind of amused, you know, because somebody had stolen my stuff. And I said, Dave, have a look at this, you know, what happened? We can't figure out who did it. And Dave said, well, if I knew who did it, you suppose the guy would get in any trouble? And I said, no, I think this is going to stay in the show, and frankly, I think it's the coolest thing in the show. And he said, okay, I did it. And so it had come out of Dave seeing an assignment that the sculpture professor put on the blackboard for the introduction to sculpture class. So when Dave was cleaning up, he had seen this assignment written there, and the assignment was to make some sculpture out of found objects. Not necessarily trash, just stuff that wasn't intended to be a piece of sculpture. And it was a study of Joseph Cornell, you know, the collage sculptor. And Dave had decided that, you know, he had access to a lot of found objects. And you know, you've probably picked up that Dave's sort of an ecologically minded guy. He was a little bit horrified by how much trash went into the landfill from the art department, from every building on campus. And so he decided that he was going to make some trash art. Well, eventually I realized that all the stuff from my desk was because a couple of days before I just cleaned my desk for the first time in probably a year. And so, you know, Dave had access to a treasure trove of all my precious stuff, and that's how it wound up being part of the Trashmaster Bomber. So that was when I found out that he was kind of interested in art and that he had some ability that most people don't have. And one thing and another, within a couple of months, I asked Dave if he could make more like that. And he said, yep, I think I could. And I said, well, how about if you have the first show of the year next fall? I guess I really wasn't even thinking about the fact that I was asking him to put together his first art show in a matter of, what, 5 months, and show it to the world in the Hastings College gallery. I don't know. You know, I was young and kind of crazy, and I didn't think about practicality, and I guess Dave didn't either. But anyway, he put together his first show, and some of the things that you can see here in his gallery are still left over from that show, still some of the best things he ever did, I think. But he sat down and went to work, and I think he told me that he put out one of his constructions per week until that show came together. And it got all kinds of attention. The president of the college said, show me this Dave Stewart guy, and went and shook his hand, and he said, this is one of the greatest art experiences I've ever had. And by hook or by crook, I don't remember whether I called Kyle McMillan, the art critic over at the Omaha paper, or maybe Ann Pagel did, someone did, and he came out and saw it and put it down in his little book that Dave Stewart was somebody he was going to watch. A couple of years later, the first show I ever had at the Hayden Gallery in Lincoln was a joint show with Dave Stewart.
Oh.
And I remember Kyle McMillan came and wrote a review of it, and you know, once again, I think I can quote literature here. I'm pretty close. It started off with a paragraph that says, any show that gives me an opportunity to see the work of the great Dave Stewart is a reason why I'll go out of town. And the work of Turner McGehee was also interesting. But Kyle became a real supporter of Dave, and I believe that by way of Kyle McMillan, Norman Geske, the director of the Sheldon Gallery, started watching him. And at that time, Norman was still heavily involved in the formation of the Museum of Nebraska Art over in Kearney. And I think he put it to them, you should be having a show of Dave Stewart's work. They gave him a solo show there pretty quickly. And Norman himself bought a substantial number of pieces and gave them to that museum. It was a private purchase that he made a donation. So that museum owns a pretty big block of Dave's work right now. And he's given them some things over the years, and they've bought some things too. So that's one of the best places to see Dave's work. Then going back to Kyle McMillan, the Sheldon Museum asked Kyle to list the 10 most important living artists in Nebraska. And Dave was right up at the top of that list. And Kyle gave a series of lectures at the theater at the Sheldon about those 10 artists that he named, and so he did a slideshow about Dave's work. And you know, just little by little, Dave's never done anything to promote his own work. It's all word of mouth, but I think that a lot of people who are in the know consider him to be one of the most unique and powerful artists that Nebraska's made. And just here recently, some of the most important collectors have begun to acquire his work, which makes me really happy that, you know, at this stage, I think that things are happening that it's, well, your project. I mean, you know, his reputation should be secured for the future, and he's not the kind of guy who's really, you know, gone out and hustled shows in New York City or Chicago or anything. So I think we all need to be pretty busy, you know, making sure that the world knows about Dave Stewart. You know, I don't know if Reader's Digest still does it, but when I was a kid, as soon as the Reader's Digest came at my house, I'd rip it open and find the recurrent article that said the most memorable person I've ever met, or something like that, my most memorable person. And I've thought a lot of times that I could write that essay about Dave. You know, he's certainly been one of the most important people to me as you know, colleague artist. Just in the way that he thinks about art, he and I have kind of evolved parallel to one another. I was just a kid when I started teaching here, and you know, it wasn't long after that I met Dave. So you know, I think that he and I have kind of educated each other over the years, and that's been a I don't know which one of us is the mentor and which one of us is the recipient of that, but we've just been really close as artists all these years. But even more, I mean, I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever met a more remarkable human being than Dave. I have, in all the years that I've known him, I don't think I've ever heard him say anything negative about anybody. He's got a really positive attitude about life. Now, you can look at his artwork and you can see that he's quite cynical. But, you know, it's all for the good of the world. It's like, you know, there's certain things here that need to be corrected. And so, yeah, I guess he's an inspiring guy, and I like to think that I've learned something about his philosophy of life over all these years. I know I'm a better teacher from having hung around Dave, because that could have been his career easily. He was like an additional teacher in the art department when he was working there. So anytime that a student was having a problem with an artwork, Dave was usually the first call problem solver, and you didn't even have to call him. You know, he's the kind of guy who can spot somebody that is ripe for a little bit of assistance. And he's got the magic touch, like a good teacher does, you know, knows when to keep his mouth shut and when a little push is needed. And he's so damn honest that you have to hear his advice. And he's earned the right to give his opinion because he's been so kind. You know, he's on the level. When he tells you something, you want to have big ears for that. I think that Dave could make anything that you need. He could probably make you a car if you wanted it. You know, he knows how to do everything, but I'll guarantee that as a plumber, he did not put together a plumbing job in the orthodox manner. And it's probably still working to this day. He's just, you know, he's the kind of guy who's looking for a different way to skin the cat on everything he does. But here, I think, is maybe the most important thing. He has an ego that does not demand anything. And Dave doesn't need any badges of office. He doesn't need any status. He doesn't need anything that the rest of us rely on for our credibility. He just does what he wants to do. And then, you know, you can like it or not. And it doesn't seem to really matter to him. So, you know, Dave, when he came to be our janitor, had sold a very profitable, well-established plumbing company, because he didn't want that anymore. He sold it, took his profits from it, bought a really nice house out in the country, and he thought, now what am I going to do with the next chapter of my life? Oh, I see that they need a janitor at the art department at Hastings College. That might be something kind of interesting to do for a little while. And, you know, he didn't need the status of being the most respected plumber in Hastings, or, you know, nice car or anything like that. He didn't care, you know, if people walked in and he was the janitor at the art department and having a good time doing it. You know, there is one place where Dave's a little bit traditional. I think that he believes that you can learn things in school. You know, you don't have to go to school to be an artist. I mean, you have to go to school probably if you want to be an art teacher, but you can learn to be an artist all on your own. He's definitely got the drive. He could have learned to do that all on his own, but he liked the interaction with the students and with the faculty. And then on the other side, I'll say that the faculty liked him a lot, and so they were always trying to talk him into taking their classes. And, you know, as an employee of the college, he was given the right to take a class, I think one class every semester. And he took advantage of that, and before he was done, I think he had taken every class in the art department, at least once. I know he took my drawing classes more than once. And he, I think, is the only student I've ever had who had no intention of getting a bachelor's degree, but went through the arduous process of doing the thesis in the art department. We kind of proudly feel like the thesis, which is a 3-semester sequence of courses, is the hardest thing that our students do in college, not just in the art department, but the hardest thing they do in college, and that's what they tell us too. And Dave went to the trouble of doing a thesis and presenting a thesis show and got credit for it and all that. One of the best theses we've ever had, even though he wasn't working for a degree. He was always the top student in the class, in every class. And, you know, it was not only because he's naturally gifted and he's a good student, but he put in all the hours. I don't know where he found the time to do it, but yeah, it didn't matter which class it was, whether it was an art history class or a drawing class or a glass blowing class. He was always the top of the class.